chosen by God to lead his people.
Have you ever wondered if one person can truly change the world? If destiny is something we are born into, or something we choose? Today, we are diving into the epic story of a man who was born a slave, raised as a prince, and became a prophet chosen by God to lead his people to freedom. This is the incredible story of Moses. Our story begins in ancient Egypt, a land of pyramids and pharaohs. The Hebrew people were slaves, their lives filled with hardship and suffering. Fearing their growing numbers, the Pharaoh issued a terrifying decree. Every newborn Hebrew boy was to be thrown into the Nile River. But one mother, desperate to save her son, placed him in a waterproof basket and set him adrift among the reeds. By a stroke of divine providence, the baby was discovered by none other than Pharaoh's own daughter. She named him Moses, which means to draw out, because she drew him out of the water. Moses grew up in the splendor of the royal palace, educated as an Egyptian prince. He had all the privilege and power one could imagine, but he was living a lie. He was a Hebrew by birth, and he couldn't ignore the suffering of his people. One day, he saw an Egyptian taskmaster brutally beating a Hebrew slave. In a moment of rage, Moses struck the Egyptian, killing him. Terrified, he buried the body in the sand, but his secret was not safe. When Pharaoh learned what had happened, Moses was forced to flee for his life, leaving behind his princely life and becoming a fugitive in the vast, empty desert of Midian. For 40 years, Moses lived as a simple shepherd. He married a woman named Zipporah and started a family. The prince of Egypt was gone, replaced by a humble man tending his father-in-law's flock. It seemed his old life was a distant memory, but God had not forgotten him, nor had he forgotten the cries of his people in Egypt. One day, while on Mount Horeb, Moses saw something extraordinary, a bush that was on fire but was not burning up. As he approached, a voice called out from the flames, "Moses, Moses." It was the voice of God. God told Moses that he had seen the misery of the Israelites and was sending him back to Egypt to lead them to freedom. Moses was filled with doubt. He was a shepherd, a fugitive, and he had a speech impediment. He asked God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" He made excuses, arguing he wasn't the right man for the job. But God reassured him, promising to be with him every step of the way. He gave Moses miraculous signs to prove his divine authority and even appointed his brother, Aaron, to be his spokesman. Reluctantly, Moses obeyed. He returned to Egypt to confront the most powerful man on earth. Standing before Pharaoh, Moses and Aaron delivered God's message, "Let my people go." But Pharaoh's heart was hard. He refused and even increased the slaves' workload. So began a terrifying contest of wills between God and the Pharaoh. God unleashed a series of 10 devastating plagues upon Egypt. The Nile turned to blood. Frogs, gnats, and flies swarmed the land. Livestock died, people were covered in boils, and hail of fire rained from the sky. Locusts devoured every green thing, and a thick darkness covered Egypt for 3 days. With each plague, Moses repeated the demand, "Let my people go," but Pharaoh stubbornly refused, his pride blinding him to the power he was up against. The final plague was the most dreadful of all. God warned that the firstborn son of every Egyptian family would die. He instructed the Israelites to mark their doorposts with the blood of a lamb. That night, the angel of death passed through Egypt, and a great cry arose as every unprotected home lost its firstborn, from the palace of Pharaoh to the dungeon of the captive. This was the Passover. Shattered and defeated, Pharaoh finally relented. He summoned Moses and told him to take his people and go. At last, after 430 years of bondage, the Israelites were free. Carrying their unleavened bread, the Israelites marched out of Egypt, a massive crowd of men, women, and children. God led them not by the shortest route, but by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, guiding them toward the Red Sea. But Pharaoh's change of heart was short-lived. Regretting the loss of his slave labor, he gathered his army, his finest chariots, and pursued them. The Israelites were trapped, with the sea before them and the Egyptian army closing in behind them. Fear turned to panic. They cried out to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die?" But Moses trusted in God. He stood before the terrified crowd and declared, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today." Following God's command, Moses raised his staff and stretched his hand out over the sea. A mighty east wind blew all night, and the waters of the Red Sea parted, creating a dry path right through the middle, with walls of water on either side. The Israelites walked through on dry ground. The Egyptians charged after them, but once the last Israelite was safely across, God told Moses to stretch out his hand again. The walls of water crashed down, and the entire Egyptian army was swallowed by the sea. On the far shore, the people of Israel saw the power of God and celebrated their miraculous salvation. Their journey, however, was far from over. Ahead of them lay a vast and unforgiving wilderness. For the next 40 years, the Israelites would wander, a test of their faith and endurance. When they were hungry, God sent manna from heaven, a bread-like substance that appeared on the ground each morning. When they were thirsty, Moses struck a rock and water gushed out. But the people often grumbled and rebelled, forgetting the miracles they had seen and longing for the familiarity of Egypt. It was during this time, at the foot of Mount Sinai, that God made a covenant with his people. Moses ascended the smoke-covered mountain to meet with God. For 40 days and 40 nights, he remained in God's presence, and there he received the 10 Commandments, a moral and spiritual code written by the very finger of God on 2 tablets of stone. These laws would form the foundation of their society and their relationship with God. When Moses came down the mountain, his face was shining so brightly from being in God's presence that he had to wear a veil. But down below, the people had already broken the first 2 commandments. Impatient and fearful, they had convinced Aaron to build them a golden calf to worship. When Moses saw their idolatry, his anger burned. He threw down the stone tablets, shattering them at the base of the mountain, symbolizing their broken covenant. After punishing the guilty, Moses pleaded with God to forgive the people, even offering his own life in their place. God relented, and Moses ascended the mountain once more to receive a new set of tablets, renewing the covenant. Despite all God had done, the generation that left Egypt was marked by disbelief. When they reached the border of the Promised Land, Canaan, they sent 12 spies to scout it out. 10 of them came back with a fearful report, speaking of giants and fortified cities, convincing the people they couldn't possibly conquer the land. Only 2 spies, Joshua and Caleb, had faith that God would give them the victory. But the people listened to the majority. They wept and rebelled, even talking of choosing a new leader to take them back to Egypt. As a result of their faithlessness, God declared that no one from that generation, except for Joshua and Caleb, would enter the Promised Land. They were sentenced to wander the desert for 40 years, until all of them had passed away. Even Moses himself would not enter. In a moment of frustration with the complaining Israelites, he disobeyed God's specific instruction. God had told him to speak to a rock to bring forth water, but instead, Moses struck the rock twice with his staff. While water still flowed, this act of disobedience in front of the people had a consequence. God told him that because he did not honor him as holy, he would not lead the people into the land he had promised them. After 40 long years, a new generation stood ready at the border of Canaan. Moses, now 120 years old, knew his time was near. He gathered the people one last time, delivering a series of powerful farewell speeches. He recounted their history, reminded them of God's laws, and urged them to be faithful in the land they were about to possess. He appointed Joshua as his successor, a man filled with the spirit of wisdom, who would finally lead the people into their inheritance. Then, Moses climbed Mount Nebo. From the summit, God showed him the whole of the Promised Land, the beautiful country he had longed for but would never set foot in. There, in the land of Moab, Moses, the servant of the Lord, died. The Bible says God himself buried him, and to this day, no one knows the place of his grave. The story of Moses is more than just a historical account. It's a timeless saga of faith, leadership, and redemption. He was a man full of flaws and doubts, yet God used him in extraordinary ways. From a baby in a basket to a prince in a palace, a shepherd in exile to a prophet of God, Moses led his people from slavery to the very edge of freedom. He stood up to a tyrant, parted a sea, and received God's law on a mountaintop. His life reminds us that God can use anyone, no matter their past or their perceived weaknesses, to accomplish incredible things.